Happy Wednesday and welcome into another episode of AL.com recruiting episode number 22, my favorite number, by the way, brought to you by Southern Orthopedic Surgeons, here for the athlete in all of us. I'm your host, Simone Eli, alongside Ben Thomas. As always, Patrick Greenfield behind the scenes. He is going to make an appearance today. We have lots to talk about, a game that he was on the sidelines for last Friday that includes a lot of future Alabama talent. It was the Thompson versus Hewitt-Trussville game, two powerhouse programs in 7A, Ben, and this one went to the Warriors. Let's talk briefly about the outcome of that game. Thompson continued to look very, very dominant coming off back-to-back 7A state titles.
Yeah, I mean, Hewitt was in the game in the first half. I mean, it wasn't the typical Thompson runaway that we've seen in their previous 5 games. They did end up winning, and it did look like a runaway. 42-9, I think, was the final score. But Hewitt was the first team to score a touchdown on them, so I guess that's something. But, you know, Thompson continues to look almost invincible. I know Mark Freeman will say that's rat poison, Simone, but we're getting very close to having to talk about, is this Thompson team – does it go right down with the 1988 Viger team and some of the great Hoover and Lee team, Montgomery teams of the past, as one of the best teams in state history? Of course, we won't be able to really make that judgment until the season's over and all the championships are secure. But they just keep on doing what they can. They got stars on every level of offense and defense. And I think the thing that makes them different this year, they've always been pretty good on defense with Sean DeFore as the defensive coordinator, but this year they have so many stars there, and they're really a top-notch defense. They're always going to be good on offense with Mark Freeman coaching them. That's his history of coaching quarterbacks and offense, but defense is really a huge step in the right direction this year for them.
Yeah, that's where we're going to start things, in fact, with Jeremiah Alexander, the Alabama commit who is headed to the Tide, the number one player in the state. Ben, number one on your AL.com A-list, just the do everything guy when it comes to the Thompson defense. And you can see him here coming off the edge, number 7 there. He was just dominant. Patrick shot these highlights from the game. And Patrick, I want to bring you in to talk about Jeremiah a little bit as well. But his stat line was pretty impressive, Ben. This is a guy who has just been dominant, a force for the Warriors, and is continuing to be in his senior year.
Well, I mean, the Alabama commit, obviously he committed to Alabama, decommitted last year, recommitted earlier this year, and I think everybody always thought he was going to go to Alabama. But his stats, I mean, this may have been his best. I haven't looked at every single game stat, but his stats this past week: 6 tackles, 2 assists, 5 tackles for a loss, 4 sacks, 5 quarterback pressures, and a fumble recovery. Yeah. Patrick, that's pretty good.
It's pretty good. And, you know, one thing about these highlights is he's going against 6'7", I believe, Riley Quick, the Alabama baseball commit. I asked him about it. He'll talk about it in the interview. But he just has speed and power. He's probably one of the most impressive prospects I've ever seen on the prep level. Besides that, the entire Thompson defense has to be one of the best defenses that I've ever seen at the prep level. Traquan Fagans was amazing. But Jeremiah Alexander, I think you see a lot of kids that are big in high school, and they'll get D1 offers, but this guy has the entire package, and it's almost like he's just scratching the potential.
Yeah,
scratching the surface.
You know? Yeah, I mean, if you just look at this guy, I mean, his body at this stage already in his high school career is just pretty unbelievable looking. I would not want to be lined up against him. I mean, you see him there on the edge for the Warriors, and you're like, wow, you should already be in college. Like, he is incredibly developed already physically. No telling what his future will look like at Alabama. But you mentioned a second ago, Patrick, that you had the opportunity to talk to Jeremiah Alexander after the game, and here's what he had to say. Let's listen to him.
Felt good. You know, we prepared all week, practiced. We had a good walkthrough on Thursday. You know, we had good team chemistry. So coming to this game, we was feeling good. You know, he's a good size O-line. Like, some people I'll be going up at the next level. So, you know, that's a good look for me. You know, it's always been a home feeling at Bama. You know, God put me in this position. So I feel like Bama was the best spot for me. Roll Tide.
All right, simple as that. Roll Tide. You get there from Jeremiah Alexander. Like you said, Ben, he had decommitted from Alabama, kind of reconsidered some of his options. But ultimately, it was the Tide. And I'm pretty sure that Nick Saban, Pete Golding, and company are excited he's headed to Tuscaloosa.
Yeah, I'm sure. And as you know, last week we had my buddy Randy Kennedy on from Sports Talk 99.5, who also does a lot of recruiting analysis stuff for AL.com. And he said multiple times that, look, this kid's been the best prospect in the state for the last 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
We saw him at Jordan-Hare 2 years ago against Central Phoenix City and Javion Cohen, who's now on the starting offensive line for Alabama. And he was the best player on the field then and continues to be so. So, I mean, no surprises here, but that game last week that Patrick saw, just unbelievable, the game he had.
I just want to add one thing. I was hanging out with your buddy John Garcia Jr. On the sideline, and I'll just run the highlights again. Obviously, he's going against Riley Quick. The cool thing about Jeremiah is he's going to be a linebacker at the next level. Like, he will be on that edge, but he's going to be rushing in a hybrid kind of position, and he has the speed to drop back in coverage, which is why he was able to get the tip drill, which went for a touchdown on play number 5 here. So these highlights are on, obviously, AL.com. But, yeah, very exciting. You're not often – when you're ever with a kid and you're like, this guy's going to play in the NFL one day. That's how it felt. Yeah, that's how it felt.
I mean, you just watch him absolutely dominate guys.
There's Riley Quick right there.
And no disrespect to Riley Quick, because he's a fantastic player, but it was like me trying to block him out there. I mean, nobody stands a chance against that guy, at least at the high school level.
If I could say one thing other from the game, besides obviously I talked about Traquan, he covered up Amari Kelly, the Auburn wide receiver recruit or commit. He was all over him all night. I thought Traquan Fagans was a very interesting prospect out there, but Hewitt Trustville just could not score against this defense, and that was basically the entire first half of the game.
Yeah, we have Traquan coming up here in just a second. Before we get to him, I want to talk about Peter Woods quickly, the 2023 recruit. Ben, this is a guy who, again, has a little bit of time to make a decision on what he wants to do, but had an impressive stat line as well. Just defensively, it's been incredible to see what type of guys Thompson has.
Well, if you just look at those highlights that Patrick had, you saw Jeremiah coming off one end, you got Peter coming off the other end. I mean, it's just disrespectful, I guess you could say. I mean, you can't play those guys. He had 2 tackles, 3 assists, 4 quarterback pressures last week. So kind of not quite as the numbers that Jeremiah had. But, I mean, imagine trying to scheme up offensively. I mean, Simone, your husband's a coach. I mean, how would he scheme up trying to block those 2 guys? I don't know how you do.
No,
and then,
I mean,
and then you add, Jax Van Zandt at middle linebacker, who's committed to North Texas. You got multiple D1 commits in the secondary. It's crazy. Peter Woods, 6'3", 260, a junior, hadn't made a decision yet. He's one of the guys vying for the top recruit in the state next year, along with his teammate Tony Mitchell and some other guys. But it's going to be intriguing to see where he goes as we get closer to that decision.
Yeah, we spoke, or Patrick spoke with Peter Woods kind of about that decision-making and what his future looks like, at least for the next level.
I'm just going to games and stuff. I've only been at Alabama thus far. I'll be taking a break this weekend, but I'll try to get out to some schools, some different schools. Yeah, it's a lot of schools that have been in contact with me recently since September 1st deadline. So it's still a whole bunch of schools. So I can't really narrow it down to the schools that have been contacting with me the most. I just want to be healthy, of course. So a good training staff, nice facilities, relationships. Relationships is always number one for me. Just being able to have a relationship with the coaches, the players, the recruits, because of the people that I'm going to be around, the people who you surround yourself with, which you're going to ultimately end up being.
So a really good mindset, I feel like, there from Peter Woods. That's an impressive statement from him and the things that he's looking for. Wants to be healthy, wants to have good relationships. Facilities matter as well. Alabama looking at him hard, of course, but you got to believe that he will only get hotter when it comes to the recruiting trail and what that looks like over the next year.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if you remember one of our early shows, I'd stopped by Thompson in preseason, and I did an interview with him and Tony, and just really impressed with all those guys, really. But Peter really came off very eloquent in what he said. It seems like he's taking his time making that decision, and like I said, he has time. I mean, he's only a junior, still got a lot of time to play. I mean, everybody's going to be after him. None of these offers are going to disappear. So he, if I were in his position, I hope I would take enough time to evaluate all my options as well.
Yeah, and speaking of options, Thompson surely has a lot of them when it comes to recruits all throughout their entire offense and defense. We're going to look at a couple other guys. Patrick, I want you to come back in for this one if you can. Tony Mitchell and Traquan Fagans. Patrick, you talked about Traquan Fagans a moment ago, the Miami commit, and was impressive. You saw him kind of playing out in the secondary a little bit. A big body who is pretty locked down defender, and he's a big guy.
Yeah, and like I said, he was covering Auburn wide receiver commit Omari Kelly pretty much all night. There was one play Omari broke off for about a 60, 70-yard touchdown, but it's because actually I want to say Alexander had nailed Kate off Caruth. So I think the entire defense got caught off guard, but the rest of the time he's able to fly sideline to sideline. He had a huge hit I was not able to get on camera that left the whole stadium, about 3,000 people, kind of oohing and ahhing.
Yeah.
And I'm just very excited to see. This is another guy. I don't know if he'll go NFL level. A lot of these guys will get opportunities, but he's definitely a D1 starter.
Ben, thoughts on Traquan Fagans? I mean, obviously, played much of his career at Oxford. Now in his final career over there at Thompson.
Yeah, I mean, he and his brothers, he's got younger brothers on the team as well that transferred all from Oxford, which was kind of a big deal during the summer. But it's so hard to tell. You can't in these defensive backs, you can't really judge by their stats very much. I mean, Traquan had 2 tackles and assists, 3 pass breakups. That's pretty good. Yeah. Tony Mitchell. On the other side is another guy we mentioned is a top 2023 guy, 2 tackles, 2 assists. I mean, the bottom line is people are going to have a hard time throwing it to either one of those guys. So it's not like they're going to get 8 or 10 interceptions because they're not throwing it that way. Yeah. But we've known for a long time that Traquan is a great player. Keith Etheridge, who left Oxford to be coach at Auburn, still has nothing but positive things to say about what a spectacular person he is, an athlete he is, and it's gonna if he sticks with his commitment to Miami, the Hurricanes are going to be getting a very good player there.
No doubt. Also, just to add, he had a low stat line, and a lot of that is because there was no time to throw the ball. So.
Good stuff. Very good stuff. Absolutely. So Thompson rolls in that game over Hewitt-Trussville, big 7A game there. I want to take a look at some of the other recruiting performances throughout the state. We do this every single week when it comes to guys who kind of stood out for us. And a guy who has Auburn in his top 3, he just announced it a moment ago, is Pike Road running back Quinshon Judkins. Ben, it's a guy you followed very closely. What's the latest on him?
Yeah, so Quinshon is a guy that, they came down to Mobile and played McGill-Tulane the first game of the season. Now, he did not play. He had a hamstring tweak late in the fall, and so he missed the first 3 games for Pike Road, which, by the way, is the number 1 team in Class 5A right now. Mm-hmm. But he's been back the last 2 games. This past week, he ran for 120 yards and 4 touchdowns. On just 9 carries in a big win over Hobeth. And then, so this week he took a visit to Notre Dame a couple of weeks ago. I think we may have mentioned that. But this week he narrowed down his choices to Notre Dame, Auburn, and Ole Miss. So it looks like he's closing in on a decision, one of the top uncommitted guys in this senior class. He's been to Ole Miss. I think he was at Ole Miss last week, actually. So we'll see when he goes to Auburn, but it looks like he's maybe getting close to a decision there.
Yeah, I mean, Auburn, Notre Dame, Ole Miss, those are some of the best of the best, at least when it comes to higher echelon teams, Power 5 teams throughout the country. And it's good to see a guy who did miss games due to injury come and have a performance like that, Ben. One guy that we talk about pretty much every single week, I feel like, is Emmanuel Henderson, the running back out of Geneva County, the future Alabama running back who we've had on the show previously and is proving in his final year that he is a force to be reckoned with. And man, I look forward to see what this guy has in store, not only for the rest of his high school career, but in college as well.
Yeah, you see the numbers there, Simone. Patrick got them up for us that he had against Abbeville, 251 yards, 5 touchdowns, just 13 carries. Yeah. I'm not smart enough to do the math, but thankfully Patrick
did it for us.
Thankfully, right, Patrick has done it for me, almost 20 yards per carry. Now, you remember, I think we mentioned last week they had a game they lost to Eridan. They had a lot of guys out with COVID. Emmanuel did play the game, but he only had 5 yards on 10 carries. I think a lot of his offensive linemen may have been sitting out that game, but he responds in a big way. A lot of people have him as the number 2 prospect in the state right now, and of course the Alabama running back commit. And as long as his line stays healthy, I think we're going to continue to see him put up these type numbers for the rest of the year for Geneva County.
Yeah, that's impressive. It's kind of like rinse and repeat when it comes to running back at Alabama and getting guys in there, and just talent at that level has just been unbelievable. Moving forward, got an Auburn guy, Eston Harris. Ben, what you know about his performance this past week.
Yeah, it's just tough he's an big offensive lineman. He transferred to Auburn from Beauregard this year. He's one of the top uncommitted guys in the state. I think Auburn, it may come down to maybe an Auburn, Alabama type battle for him. He's only had 2 negative plays against Jeff. It's tough to judge offensive linemen, Simone, because some coaches don't keep O-line statistics. It's hard to quantify really. But Coach Keith Estridge said he only had 2 negative plays in their win against Jeff Davis and graded out better than 92%. Now he's on the line. That also includes Drew Bobo, the son of Auburn offensive coordinator Mike Bobo, who looks like probably he's going to make a decision soon. Auburn, Georgia in the mix for him. Also Braden Joyner, another big line prospect at Auburn High School. But Eston Harris, keep a lookout on him and Drew Bobo both. I think probably we're getting close to decisions for both those guys. And Auburn University could really use both those 2 guys. I don't know. I'm not making a prediction, but certainly Auburn in it for both those guys.
No doubt about that. Those are our 3 top recruit performances. All right, moving forward now to our spotlight games for this week. Ben, it's kind of insane to me to feel like we are already halfway through the high school football season. Many teams on the bye this week. They take that mid-season bye, or they play out of region. So not exactly a ton of matchups when it comes to like significance for region, but we do have some pretty good ones throughout the state. We begin with Opelika at Central. And the guys that we see here in terms of recruits to watch is just pretty phenomenal, Ben.
Yeah, if you look at the games around the state this week, in our part of the state, Simone, Mobile, and up in the north part of the state, there's not a whole lot of attractive matchups. But if you look at the center of the state, there is some good matchups. Starting with this one, Opelika and Phoenix City. Of course, we've talked a lot about Jarrell Stinson. You'll remember he was the Auburn commit for a long time. In fact, he committed right after they fired Gus Malzahn and stuck with it for a long time, but recently decommitted, or not recently, a while ago decommitted, and looks like Ole Miss is really in the thick of it for him, but he's a really good player, Jarrell Stinson for Opelika. And then Central Phoenix City is a team I feel like we've slept on a little bit. They're 5-0. Their biggest game, 2 of their biggest games this week against Opelika. They might be on our list again next week, Simone. They play Auburn. So they could be a spotlight game again next week. But, of course, the latest Caleb Nix, as a quarterback there. J.Q. Hardaway's a Cincinnati commit. But these 2 2023 guys, Tamarian Parker, I have not seen him play, but a lot of people tell me that he could be the number 1 prospect in the state next year. He's that good a player. And, of course, we've already mentioned Peter Woods and Tony Mitchell are in that conversation as well. And then Carmelo English, junior receiver, a lot of big plays he's making. So we're going to get to see these guys on a big stage both this week and next week, and certainly in the playoffs when we get to that point.
Yeah, Central Phoenix City looking to stay perfect on the year. Meanwhile, spotlight game number 2, Montgomery Academy and Montgomery Catholic. Ben, now, I know you have pretty good insight when it comes to Montgomery schools, having lived there before and covered those teams a lot closer than I have. Is this a big rivalry game here?
Yeah, it's the Capital City Conference is what they call it there. And as you can see, Montgomery, these 2 teams played twice last year. And Montgomery Catholic won the second time to get to the championship game. But Montgomery Catholic, I don't know if you noticed, they have just been killing people. They've had one of maybe the more understated seasons of anybody in the state. They're undefeated. We've talked a lot about the guy you just saw on the screen there, TJ Dudley, the linebacker commit from Oregon. But if you look at their safety, they got studs there too. Jordan Thomas and Kylan Griffin both committed to Mississippi State. So, Montgomery Academy, good team with good players, but the spotlight recruiting wise is on these 3 guys specifically for Montgomery Catholic and Coach Kirk Johnson there.
All right, so 2 big spotlight games there. One out of Montgomery and one over in the Auburn area. Ben, before we go, I know we had talked pre-show that you had a couple things that you wanted to update in regards to recruits throughout the state. Am I making that up, or did you actually have an update?
No, you're right about that, Simone. Just a couple of guys I want to mention. Number 1, we should mention A.J. Harris. This is the Glenwood defensive back from the Phoenix City area, 6'2", 180. 5-star guy in that 2023 class. Another one of these guys that are in that class with Peter and those guys that could be the top prospect in the state. Tamarian Parker, we just talked about. He narrowed his list to 7 schools this week, Simone. Alabama's one of them. Okay. LSU, Clemson, Notre Dame, North Carolina, Georgia, and Ohio State. That's pretty substantial list there. A lot of people think it's maybe a Georgia-Clemson battle for him. Yeah. But rangy cornerback, who can do a lot of different things. Great player there for Glenwood, and it's we don't normally see a lot of AISA guys on this list, but we have him there. And then the other guy I wanted to mention is Deuce Spurlock, a great athlete out of Madison Academy in the north part of our state. He will be taking an official visit this week to Michigan. I don't remember a lot of guys from our state going to Michigan, but here's one who's got a chance. He's got an offer there, I believe, already. 3-star athlete. He's got some SEC offers: South Carolina, Vanderbilt, Mississippi State. But going to Michigan this week, and this guy, Deuce is probably, I think Auburn. He's been to Auburn a couple of times. I don't know that they've given him an offer. He may be an inside linebacker at college, maybe a safety, DB type guy, but guy that plays obviously a lot of different positions for Madison Academy. So just two names to watch: Deuce Spurlock, 2022 guy, and AJ Harris, who's only a junior this year.
All right, good stuff. Ben Thomas, Patrick Greenfield, episode 22. AL.com recruiting brought to you by Southern Orthopedic Surgeons. We're going to continue to see recruiting kind of ramp up as the high school football season continues, the college football season, and guys wanting to go on official visits. Finally, they're able to do that, go to schools and actually see games in person. We know how much the atmosphere of games can matter to some of these younger guys and wanting to get a feel for what Saturday nights or Saturday during the day looks like at their potential landing spot. So, all right, guys, thanks so much for tuning in. AL.com recruiting episode number 22, brought to you by Southern Orthopedic Surgeons, here for the athlete in all of us. Y'all have a great rest of your Wednesday, and we'll see you about this time next week.